Hey everyone, welcome to Devs in the Shed. Today we are now going to have a look at how to set up a project within CodeCatalyst.
Okay, so I've already created an account, but when you create an account for CodeCatalyst, you're going to use an identity that is not attached to any specific AWS account. It's called a builder ID. You can go ahead and use sign up to create that builder ID, and that is a unique identity that you can use between different other AWS services such as Skills Builder, but CodeCatalyst takes advantage of that too.
And you'll see why that. And Code Whisperer actually is a fantastic one too.
Oh, that's a good example of that, Matt. And it's an identity you can carry with you depending on your particular organization or the projects that you're working on, not something that's locked to a specific AWS account. I've got a builder ID, so I'm just going to go ahead and sign in on that. And once I've signed in as obviously the builder ID that's linked to my Amazon email address. Now you can have a number of different builder IDs. And that will take you directly into the CodeCatalyst. So once you're logged in, you are at a dashboard, and that dashboard can show you a number of the projects that you might have active that you're working on. But what we're going to do is go ahead and show you what it looks like to create a brand new project, and also how to invite somebody else to collaborate on that project. So once you're at that dashboard, we can see that you can have projects, but you also have this concept of spaces. And spaces is probably analogous to maybe the organization that you're working to. And let's just say that organization was job company like A, for example. And under job company A, you have a number of different projects you're working on. We'll go ahead and we're going to create a new space, and we'll call it Dev Shed.
And while you're doing that, Paul, like one of the things that I've used spaces for is I actually tend to define them because we're in a larger company, right? I tend to define them by the team. So I'd have a space for my team, and within that, we'd have our projects.
Yeah, that's probably a really good example of like where that might work as well. So it definitely could be between like different organizations. An organization may have many spaces. But a domain or an area in an organization may also have multiple projects as well.
Flexible, treat it how you're set up as a business, basically.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so we now are going to, for this specific space, attach it to an AWS account. So I've got an account that's open here, so I'm going to copy that out and paste that account ID in. Now, once you have that account ID in, paste it in there, you need to verify that you are in fact the owner of that account. So this is a bit of a two-step piece. So in one tab, I've opened the AWS console. So we're going to verify that because I have an open session AWS console. I can deep link and click directly in. So this is back into my AWS account. I'm going to go ahead and verify that that token was correct. But I'm also going to, at the same time, create that specific CodeCatalyst support role. So if you wanted to dive into that a little bit more, we can see that support role has, a policy that's attached to it and a set of permissions. And this is like to enable CodeCatalyst to assume the role that has all of these permissions that are involved for that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to verify that space, which means that any billing or anything that's going to have a cost is going to be associated with that account. So we can return back here, and I can go ahead and create that space. Now, that only takes a couple of seconds, and you'll see that we'll have a CodeCatalyst environment or a space that's set up ready, and I've called that Dev Shed. So for the very first step, as we talked about in the introduction, we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And when I create that new project, I'm going to start with a blueprint. So CodeCatalyst, getting started with CodeCatalyst, I'd recommend that everybody start with a blueprint. As you become more familiar, you can bring your own code. You can hook it to external GitHub repositories, or you can start from scratch. That will include designing all of the pipeline, the deployment, all the creation of infrastructure you've got there as well. But for this example, we're just going to choose, selecting a blueprint. So, I don't think it'd be a demo video if we didn't pick a to-do web application. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick this to-do web application here. And when you select a blueprint, you'll see that there's a bit of information about that specific blueprint. This is just some information that you might see in the the basic readme file in any sort of GitHub repo that you're going to clone. Gives you a bit of an overview of what's going into that piece of application. As you can see here, there's a CloudFront distribution, an S3 bucket, API gateway, Lambda function, DynamoDB table. But you might notice that you can choose a couple of different programming languages. This programming language is specifically set up in this blueprint to determine the language that the CDK is implemented in. And we'll see what that looks like as we go ahead and create that project. So I'm just going to shrink that back over. We've selected to do application. We're going to go ahead and click next. We're going to give our project a name, and we will call it to do DevShed. And now we're going to set up the specific resources for that project, or for that, for this project. So if we had a number of accounts attached to this specific space, we could assign a different AWS account to that. And we're going to use the exact account that I set up when I created this specific space.
So that's pretty cool, because that's like multi-account deployments, right? So it must have a pipeline that's multi-account there.
Yeah,
we'll look at it in a second, won't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. So in a future session, we'll probably look at what it looks like to deploy in 2 stages to different accounts. But because you can associate multiple accounts to these projects. But with this one, we're going to deploy directly into this specific account. We'd have to set up the roles in the other account to do that.
Cool.
Now, obviously, we know when we are setting up or building an application, if we're using CDK or we're using CloudFormation, we need a role that enables us to create those resources. At the moment, there is no role that's created that enables this CodeCatalyst project to be able to create resources. And there's a deep link button that will enable us to create that role. If your organization had specific roles that you were enabling to do that, so that might disable certain features being put in place or have certain controls across that role, you can go ahead and select an existing role that you've already created. But for this example, we're just going to go ahead and create one of these specific roles that gives us a permission to basically create whatever we need to create in this environment. So if we were to look again at that role, we would see that there's quite a lot in here that out of the box is being granted access to. So yeah, consider that with in regards to what you're granting your project access to create in your environment. So I'm going to go ahead and create that role because I've got a space in there, so it's just picking up the name. So I'll go ahead and create that role in that account. And we can see that within my AWS account, that role now exists. So if I go back to CodeCatalyst, we can see that has a socket connection, obviously, and that role is there and available. Now, with every web application, as we spoke about earlier, we've got code. Code needs a repository. Another feature that we haven't spoken about is CodeCatalyst will host your code for you and set up and create and manage a repository for you, as well as the credentials. We'll use To-Do App as the name of that Git repository, and we'll see what that looks like in just a bit. Now, at the front, we talked about the different CDK programming languages. There was Python, Java, and TypeScript available. You can see here there's Python and TypeScript. That's just for the front end, for the CDK for the front end. We'll choose Python for that. And for the back end, you can see that's where the Java came from there as well. So we'll pick Python for that as well. Now, for the region, you can go ahead and change that. We'll do AP South East. Is it 4 for Melbourne, Matt?
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, we'll put it in Sydney.
Sydney for 2, yeah.
Sydney for this specific example. Just given the time that Sydney is still rolling out different features, I don't want to bump into any features that we might use in future iterations. So we'll go ahead and we'll create that project, and we'll see that will take that blueprint, inject all of those settings over the top of it, and set us up with a project environment that we can begin with. I mean, look, the line literally said with just a few minutes, and it was seconds really that it came down to. So I now have a project set up within CodeCatalyst. And we'll go through each of the other steps in the next set of videos. But the first thing I want to do as part of any development team is invite one of my members of my team. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invite a specific member, and we're going to do that by inserting their email. So I'm going to use Matt's email to do that. So Matt, read out exactly what your email is so we can run through that.
Yeah, I'll actually paste it over to you very quickly. It makes it easier.
Okay, so I'm going to paste in and invite Matt Coles. If I had additional members within that space, you'd be able to select them here. But we're going to do an email invitation to Matt Coles. And for his role, he can either be a contributor or a project manager. So I'll invite him in as a project administrator. We'll go ahead and we'll click invite. Now, while that's happening, we'll show the other side of what it looks like to join and receive that and take you through those steps. So we'll bring up Matt's screen and we'll take us through those steps.
No problems, Paul.
So at this stage, Matt, with that account, you do have a builder ID. Now, that wouldn't have mattered if you didn't have a builder ID, but you would have go through the steps to join that project of creating a builder ID.
Yeah, exactly. And so now I'm just going to pop it up on the screen for everyone. I click that invite, and I believe I am now seeing the same view. I actually didn't have to do anything there. That was I just went straight in, clicking the accept.
Yep.
So yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah, awesome.
In the next segment, let's take a look at how I can collaborate with you on this one, Paul.
Yep, sounds good. See you then.
Cool.